RC bashing is a lot of fun, but there's nothing worse than when your car ends up upside down and you have to go retrieve it. Can we make that process a lot more convenient using an RC drone? Let's find out. To help with this experiment, Ruko sent me the awesome new F11 Pro 2, but if this isn't powerful enough, we might have to go just a little bit bigger. This camera drone actually looks really awesome. I've never messed with one of these before, so we're gonna dig into this thing, see exactly how it works, how well it takes video, and then see how much weight it can lift. Along with this little folding drone, we also got a couple of batteries. These things charge using USB-C, which is pretty convenient. I'll go ahead and get these on the charger now. The drone's gonna be controlled by this included transmitter. I really don't have a ton of experience with this kind of system, so I'm really curious to see how this thing works out. So far, just holding the transmitter, I will say this does feel pretty premium. It's got a space to hold your phone and maybe even a small tablet. And then it's got a little screen here at the bottom for status. I don't know what any of that means or the beeping, but we'll find out. This thing also has a knob on the back and a couple of buttons. Looks like that's for taking a picture and that's for recording. And I assume, yeah, this is also USB-C rechargeable. Now, looking at the drone itself, this is a folding drone. There are a few different drones on the market that look very similar to this. The compact size means it's pretty easy to carry, and it's fairly lightweight, definitely has some advantages, especially regulatory advantages. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but first I see a bunch of screws on this thing, so we're definitely gonna see what's inside. Under this protective cover, we do have a camera here with a 3-axis gimbal. This should mean that the video is pretty steady on it. I am curious as to how far down we can look. Hopefully we can look straight down, because when we're trying to pick something up, we need to be able to see directly below us. Underneath these folding propellers are brushless motors. These brushless motors are actually outrunners instead of the typical inrunner you'd see on an RC car. The main difference between the two is that instead of having a rotor inside that spins, the actual stator is on the inside and the rotor spins around it. We also have some nice metal mesh here covering the cooling holes. That should stop debris from getting in, which is good because we may end up crashing this thing when we're trying to lift some weight with it. Depending on where the motors are, they're going to spin in opposite directions. We've got 2 that spin clockwise and 2 that spin counterclockwise. That's actually how the drone affects its rotation, by speeding up and slowing down those blades. This is very similar to how you control the attitude of an RC car when you're jumping it. In an RC car, you spin the wheels faster or slower, and the equal and opposite reaction makes the rest of the car want to go the opposite direction. The exact same thing happens with one of these quadcopter drones. If they want to rotate one direction, they slow down motors that are going in that direction and speed up the motors that are going in the opposite direction. They can also use those motors to control how it tilts in these 2 axes and speed them all up and down to control altitude. And that's how one of these flies. Just like in an RC car that has a gyro to help you with steering, this also has a gyro in it, and it uses that gyro along with some really complex math to keep this thing in the air. You wouldn't be able to fly one of these things by yourself. You really do need a computer to help you keep it aloft. Hopefully these are going to be clearly labeled so I know where they go when I put this back together. Shouldn't be too much of a problem though. One thing I like about how these folding propellers are set up is if you damage just one propeller blade, you can replace it individually. That should end up saving us a little bit of money in the long run. This drone's going to have some sensors on it that we wouldn't have on an RC car. This is a height sensor, and it's used to make sure the drone doesn't crash into the ground. In theory, we'll have to see how well it works when we test this thing out. I definitely have my doubts as to whether or not this specific drone is going to be able to pick up an RC car, especially something as big as a 1/10 scale RC car, which is why we've got some bigger equipment we're going to be looking at here in a little bit. But beyond that, I'm also hoping we can use this to get some really cool shots for you during bashing. I think being able to watch a car jump from above should be a pretty neat perspective. All right, this cover appears to be on pretty tight, though I don't think there are any additional clips or anything holding it on. It's just really good plastic molding. There we go, lifting that off. We get our first look at this circuit board. We can get a better look at that height camera. We've got a little bit of Celastic here for its connector so it doesn't come off. We have a bunch of different antennas here going to this separate module. This is probably just an off-the-shelf wireless module. A lot of companies will use these off-the-shelf modules just because it's easier for them and they don't have to go in and design something of their own. As you can see, it's just soldered directly to their custom PCB. Another thing I'm really curious about on this is repairability. If you were to break an arm, what would it take to get this arm out of here? I do see a single screw holding the hinge together. Let's pull that out and see what we get. Unfortunately, that doesn't really release the arm. I think we're going to have to go a little bit deeper, so let's pull the rest of these visible screws out of here and see if we're going to be able to get one of these arms out to replace it, or if it's going to be a bit more difficult than that. While I'm taking this apart, if you like to see unique RC content like this, make sure you get subscribed. You hitting that subscribe button and especially hitting that bell tells me you enjoy these unique, fun video ideas and encourages me to keep making them. By the way, speaking of making, this propeller doesn't belong belong to a drone that already exists. If this doesn't have the jam we want, we're gonna be building one. Okay, with all those screws out, let's see if this is gonna come apart easily or if it's still gonna fight us. Okay, that came apart pretty easily, and we're faced with another board, some more sensors, and we can see the top of that camera gimbal, which is nice and rubber mounted to prevent vibration from transferring from the drone into your video feed. Up here is what I'm assuming is the GPS antenna module, and looking on their website, it appears as though this is also a remote ID module. We'll talk about FAA remote ID in a few minutes. It's kind of an interesting subject that's been evolving over the last few years, and people have some pretty strong opinions on it. Now, looking at this, it appears as though we are definitely not going to have an easy time getting these arms off of here. As you can see, the motor wires are soldered on, and those motor wires do appear to go through these arms. I can lift one of these front arms off of its hinge, but in order to actually remove it, it looks like we'd have to go a bit deeper and probably disassemble the arm or desolder it from here. It doesn't look like it's impossible to do, but it also doesn't look like it's designed for just anybody to dig into and replace on their own. Hopefully, we won't be testing whether or not that's necessary in a few minutes. Up front here, we do have a couple of lights, and there are also some lights on the bottom here on the rear arms. Let me get this together, and then I'm going to show you what we're going to do to see just how much weight this little guy can lift. And of course, I also want to see some jumping from that drone's perspective, but before we do that, we got to fix this car. In the upgrade video for that car, I ran out of time and ended up not upgrading the front differential, and now we're paying for it because it turned one of these gears into the forbidden glitter, so we're going to go ahead and rebuild it, and this time, we're going to do it right. You may have noticed during the how to jump video that I was having a really hard time getting the truck to land straight, and that's because this thing was actually broken the entire time I was doing that video. I just didn't notice because I was so focused on what I was saying and doing that I didn't realize the car wasn't handling the way it was supposed to. I actually didn't even realize it till I was editing the video, and then I went back and checked, and yeah, it's been broken for a while. It probably broke in the same crash that ended up pulling that pillow ball out of the front end. I don't actually need very many parts out of this original differential because we're going to be upgrading just about everything on it, but unfortunately the parts I do need require me to completely disassemble it. But you guys have seen me rebuild differentials a million times, and this battery just finished charging, so let me get this together off camera, and then let's go see what this little drone can do. All right guys, fully charged battery, let's start recording on the drone and take off, see how this thing works. It is fairly breezy out, so I think this is going to be a really good test of how controllable it is. So far it feels pretty darn good. I went ahead and put it in sport mode just because of how windy it is out. You have to bear with me, I'm not really familiar with using these camera drones, but so far so good. Seems to hold very still when you want it to. It's not super fast, but it's reasonably quick. Let's turn it around and bring it back to me. See if we can buzz me here. Maybe gain a little altitude. Yeah, that's pretty fun. I think I've flown a camera drone maybe twice in my life before, and that was only for a few minutes, so I'm gonna have to focus on the camera on the drone itself here. But overall, it seems pretty steady. The camera view itself is pretty good. I think it's taken a very nice video. Get it turned around here. Bring it back overhead again, see if we can get a flyby again. There it goes. All right, cool. Let's move it up towards this tower and see if we can't get a good view of the tower. Go a little bit higher up in the air. Not sure how high it's gonna go. Try and stay away from those power lines though. Oh yeah, we can get a nice height up. Okay, it stops at 98 feet. I think that's a beginner mode, and for me, that's probably a good thing. Now, I think I can turn the camera down. Yep. We can see all the donuts people have been doing out here. Looks like someone's been having quite a bit of fun out in this parking lot. Can we see straight down? Looks like pretty darn close. Yes, we can. We can look up. There's me. Hello. Now let's get some distance out of it. See just how far away we can go. We're gonna go just a couple feet off the ground here. And let's haul butt across this parking lot and see how far away we can get. Now obviously this thing is not super fast, but it's reasonably quick. It's definitely quick enough for a camera drone. As you can see in the video, it's definitely moving along. And we've got good reception still. Range feels pretty good so far. We're about 2/3 of the way across this field and we're just a few feet off the ground, so I think we're gonna get plenty of range out of this. We're about 800 feet away right now, just a few feet off the ground still. So yeah, this feels really, really good. All right guys, we've got the drone holding steady somewhere up there, aimed at the ramp. Let's see what it can see. Let's get another jump.
I'm hoping this is going to give us a really cool, different perspective. Obviously, I'm being a little bit conservative right now, but let's go ahead and get the drone a little bit closer. All right, we got her set up for a close-up shot now. Let's see how that looks. I really don't want to hit the drone. It's getting very breezy out, but as you can see, the drone is definitely holding pretty steady. It does a pretty good job of staying where you put it, which is good because I'm not really paying attention to where it is right now. Let's get another jump out of it. Here we go. All right, let's go for a view from behind the ramp. This is someplace I normally wouldn't be able to stand. I'm really curious to see how this footage looks afterward. I really can't tell if it's any good or not. Hopefully it's pretty fun though. Let's do that again. All right, now let's put it really in harm's way. That might not look like it, but it's pretty much right in front of the ramp now. That was close. All right, now let's see how it looks when we're looking straight down at the ramp. Here we go. That got within about 2 feet of it. All right, one more like that. Here we go. Nice. All right, guys, let's bring this thing in and see if it can carry some weight.
First of all, I meant to record in a higher frame rate. I thought I was doing 50 or 60 FPS. It ended up being 30 FPS. So this can record smoother video. I just really don't know what I'm doing because, again, this is my first time messing with one of these. And also, as I'm sure you saw, the framing of the jumps could have been better. But don't worry, I'll get better at it and we'll see some really cool footage with this thing in the future. But now I want to see if I can retrieve an RC car with it. I've got some really strong Kevlar string and some very powerful magnets. Let's go see what this thing can lift. Now, I do want to mention, if I break this, this is 100% my fault. This thing is not designed for what we're about to do to it. And if it does end up not being strong enough, don't worry, we've got the solution for that.
All right, guys, over here we've got the drone with the strings coming off of it and a magnet tied to those strings. And then over here, we've got a Grom on its side with magnets on top. Let's see if we can grab this thing. Now, I'm going to be using the camera on the drone itself to get over there and then hopefully tilt the camera down and then snag the truck. I genuinely have no idea whether or not we're actually going to be able to pick it up, but let's go find out. All right, we're going to ease ourselves over there, try and get as close to the truck as possible here. Let me tip the camera down. All right, we can see it. Keep moving in here. I really have my doubts as to whether or not I'm actually going to be able to grab this. I'm sure it's going to latch on, but it might just grab the drone right out of the air instead of picking up the truck. But I guess we're about to find out because we are getting close here. See if I can see the magnet. I can. All right, let's ease her on in. Definitely getting close. Got it. All right, let's see if we can pick it up. Oh, unfortunately, no, we can't. Let me get a little closer and show you. So as you can see, we were able to flip the truck back on its wheels, but unfortunately, even with full throttle, we can't pick it up. I wonder how close we are. It's got to be pretty close. Okay, just for fun, I just took the body off. Let's see if we can bring just the body back to us. Oh yeah, I can carry the body, no problem. Okay, so obviously we need something with some more power.
And we're gonna do that using all of this. Everything you see here is gonna build a 10-inch drone, and this thing is gonna be a huge step up in both size and power. There are gonna be a lot of familiar parts here. We've got a brushless motor, an ESC, a receiver, a chassis, and a few new things such as these giant propellers, a camera, a flight controller, and an FCC ID module. I've built quite a few drones in the past, but I've never built one this big, so this is gonna be a pretty interesting project for both of us. We've got these huge, big, beefy arms that are gonna hold the motors and propellers, a nice stout central chassis that'll hold all the electronics, and then a bunch of other bits and pieces. Let's go ahead and get this together and see what it's gonna look like. I bought this frame on AliExpress, and unfortunately it didn't come with any instructions, so we're just gonna kind of have to use the pictures that we got and a little bit of common sense here, and hopefully we can get this together. Okay, I think I got these screws figured out, and with that one arm on, I can already tell this thing is gonna be absolutely massive. I cannot wait to see how this thing flies. Let me get the rest of this frame together and I'll show you what it looks like. There we go, this thing looks like an absolute tank. It's so big I can barely get it in frame. Now it's time to attach these big, beautiful 900 kV Outrunner motors. These things are absolutely massive. I'm probably gonna run this drone on 7S, though this ESC can do all the way up to 8S, so if it's not powerful enough on 7S, we've got some headroom. Now we just need to mount up the ESC. This does the same thing as the ESC on an RC car. The flight controller, this is the brains of the operation. Our HD camera in the front, and our comically small receiver in the rear. The FCC also requires a remote ID module for any drone that weighs over 250 grams. I've got this one. I'm gonna go ahead and get all this mess wired up off camera, then it's gonna be time for some heavy lifting. Okay, now I've got everything wired and soldered up. Be warned, it's still kind of the wild, wild west out there when it comes to these kinds of drones. Wiring these things up isn't really the same as wiring up an RC car. For instance, even though the connectors for the video transmitter and the receiver both plugged into the flight controller, the wiring pinout on both of them was wrong, and I had to depin and repin both of these. You do get instructions, but it still can be a little bit confusing. But now's gonna come the real challenge, and that's getting all of this stuff programmed. We're gonna be using a program called Betaflight Configurator to do this, and whereas, as you can see, this interface does seem fairly user-friendly, and it's gotten a lot more user-friendly over the years, there's still a lot of things you have to know, and a lot of things that simply aren't intuitive. Fortunately, there are tutorials for just about everything online, but even with that, I'm gonna tell you that I'll probably spend more time doing this part of the project than any other part, or possibly all other parts combined. I'm gonna dig into this thing, get everything configured, and I'll let you know how it goes here in just a few minutes. It did not go well. As you can see from the obvious skid marks here on this board and on this board, we had a bit of a catastrophic failure, and it was actually my fault. I put these boards too close together, and this port smacked into some of the components on this board, causing a short and killing both of them. Fortunately, through the magic of Amazon, I'm able to get a replacement set next day. While we're waiting for that, I think we should up our game on that magnet mount. We're gonna be picking up a lot more weight, and this is gonna match our drone anyway, so let's CNC cut a new one out of carbon fiber. In order to do that, I'm just gonna create a quick design in CAD, then I'm gonna create some toolpaths in CAM. I'm gonna put this thing on my CNC mill. If you haven't seen this CNC mill before, I have a whole video on it. It's really interesting. This is an awesome machine. And now we're gonna have this awesome machine CNC cut this part out for us. There we go, guys. This thing looks great, and it should work really well too. I have mentioned it before, but I think it bears repeating. If you're ever gonna be CNC machining carbon fiber, you need to be very, very careful. Make sure you have a great dust extraction system with good filtration. You really do not want to get carbon fiber dust in your lungs. We're also gonna be using much stronger magnets. These magnets came with their own adhesive, but I think I'm going to use some 3M VHB instead. I trust the VHB, and for the kind of weight we're hopefully going to be picking up, we're going to need something really, really strong. And now the replacement stack has arrived. Let me see if I can get these installed without blowing them up. And here she is, guys. One heavy lift 10-inch prop drone. This thing's absolutely massive. I'm really not sure if it's going to be able to pick up any weight, though. I'm actually really impressed with just how stable that camera drone was. I kind of expected it to fall out of the sky when I put a bunch of load on it, but it did really, really well. Let's see how this thing does.
All right, guys, I'm not gonna lie to you. This thing kind of scares the crap out of me, but let's go see if we can pick up the Grom. As you can see, we've got the magnet underneath it. This thing's gonna be a lot harder to control than the other drone was, simply because it's just not really tuned the same way, but hopefully we can get over here and get it picked up. Oh man, this thing is really hard to control. All right, let me slow things down. All right, let's see if we can't grab this thing. All right, guys, that magnet's all over the place and I can't control it, but for the sake of the video, let's pretend we did hook up to it and see if we can actually pick this little truck up. There we go. She's in the air. We got her flying. The quad is definitely not happy. Let's get this back on the ground. Well, it'll definitely need some more tuning before we can pick up any real weight, but just to show you that it actually does fly well, let me fly it without that on the bottom. As you can see, it's actually pretty stable when you're not trying to pick up a bunch of weight. And obviously this thing definitely needs more tuning before it could really be a heavy lift drone, but it's definitely got the power for it.
So there we go, guys. We did build a giant drone and it did pick up an RC car. And whereas this thing's an absolute beast, I would say the real star of the show was this little Ruko camera drone. This thing almost picked up that same car, and at full throttle, trying as hard as it could, it was still rock stable, which means that under heavy winds, or if you hit a small tree branch or something like that, it's also almost certainly gonna stay stable. And getting that kind of tuning into a drone really isn't easy. With a bunch of tuning work, this 10-inch drone could definitely pick up a bunch of weight and be pretty stable, but it would take a ton of tuning work and definitely a better latching system for the vehicles. Maybe some sort of hook or pincer. Let me know down in the comments if you'd be interested in seeing me do a second part on this where we actually make this thing pick up some real heavy weight. Let me know if you think this is even a practical idea at all. While you're down there, make sure you get subscribed and hit that bell, then check out one of these videos.